Bueno, a continuación es un placer para mí presentar al doctor Einar Bjornsson del National University Hospital of Iceland, que nos va a hacer vía virtual la ponencia Clinical Trials in Drug-induced.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start with thanking the organizers very much for inviting me, and particularly Raul and Maribel for their friendship. So my task today for the next 20 minutes is to discuss the challenges and possibilities on clinical clinical trials in drug-induced liver injury. As this is a general hepatology course, I would like to say a few words in general about drug-induced liver injury, or DILI. Drug-induced liver injury is a rare but clinically important and challenging problem with respect to both diagnosis and management. Apart from the discontinuation of the implicated agent, there is no standard therapy shown to affect the natural history of DILI other than liver transplantation in a patient with acute liver failure due to drug hepatotoxicity. Some randomized clinical trials have been undertaken both for prevention of DILI in patients taking potentially hepatotoxic drugs, and also a few studies for the treatment of DILI when it has occurred. Unfortunately, these studies have been very heterogeneous. They lack consistency in definitions of DILI, and most suffer from major methodological limitations. There is therefore a medical need with good studies, good quality studies, to treat patients with symptomatic and biochemically advanced DILI in order to improve their prognosis. However, this is a major challenge for several reasons. DILI is a rare condition, as we all know. Most patients with DILI have a good prognosis and don't need any treatment. The DILI phenotype is very variable, also with the same drug. Different phenotypes of DILI, cholestatic versus hepatocellular, which are the main biochemical types, might need different therapies. Endpoints and outcomes in studies of clinical trials on DILI have not been defined and need to be defined. Thus, in order to do a good quality trial with defined endpoints and outcomes, international consensus of DILI is necessary. Because we need to have a consensus on the causality assessment, which is a difficult task in DILI, we need to agree on elements that are required in all patients for exclusion of competing etiologies. You need to define what is really a DILI case. Most of the time it's based on the upper limit of normal of ALT and alkaline phosphatase and bilirubin. We need inclusion and exclusion criteria for enrollment. And we need primary efficacy estimates with precise endpoints for biochemical improvement and also symptomatic improvement. And some of the important symptomatology is itching, which we don't have any good treatment for. We need monitoring plans for efficacy and safety. And last and not least, we need multi-centered trials performed by motivated researchers with governmental financial support. There are some examples of relatively good clinical trials in DILI, and one of the most famous is the treatment with intravenous N-acetylcysteine, or NAC, which was shown to improve early stage non-acetylphenomenon acute liver failure by increasing transplant-free survival. This was a randomized controlled trial of NAC in adults with non-paracetamol or non-acetaminophen-induced acute liver failure, where DILI patients was the largest etiological groups together with other etiologies. This demonstrated efficacy in reducing deaths and transplant with early grade encephalopathy. Spontaneous survival increased from 30% to 52% in coma grade 1 and 2. But this was a very difficult study to do due to the rarity of this condition, and it required multi-center study in the US, and it took more than 7 years to recruit all these patients. This is the senior author and the chairman of the acute liver failure study group in the US, William Lee from Texas. And he said in a consequent paper that, he said, despite calls for it, it is highly unlikely that another randomized controlled trial will be performed for the super orphan condition of acute liver failure, let alone for idiosyncratic drug-induced liver injury-induced acute liver failure. So in early 2019, the Pro-Euro DILI network, which is led by the Malaga group, by Raul Rade and Maribel Lucena, it was established a cost action supported by the European Union by creating a Pro-Euro DILI network for DILI, for several aspects of DILI. And during this time, last year, we've had 3 meetings. One of the working groups in this cost action for DILI is a design and endpoints, a group that is supposed to develop and design a clinical DILI investigation and trials. So the group is supposed to come up with and define thresholds for patient inclusion, in special patient population, monitoring plans, stopping rules, safety signals, and outcome parameters to optimally plan clinical trials. And review and evaluate therapeutic options for patients with DILI. We need to define the therapeutic strategy, what should be the comparator, and the patient populations. And furthermore, this group, as a part of the cost action, is supposed to attract support for planning, setup, and coordinating observational and interventional multi-center clinical trials in DILI, and investigate the effectiveness of known or novel interventions that could improve clinical outcomes of DILI. Furthermore, in concert with the clinical trials, explore the value of biomarkers and assess these biomarkers in DILI versus other causes of liver injury. So the task is supposed to run over 4 years. First of all, to set up short scientific missions with the regulatory agencies, to standardize procedures that would facilitate a multi-center trial in DILI. And we should come up with a proposal for study design for risk of biomarker evaluation and to design clinical trials in DILI to assess the effect of an intervention and so on. So in this group 4, we have many talented people. So apart from myself, Mercedes Robles from Malaga, Spain, Judith Sanabria also from Malaga, Spain, Musil Murad from Turkey, Guido Stirnemann from Switzerland, Anna Licata, Palermo, Italy, Lana Necic and Vesna Aleksic from Bosnia-Herzegovina, Mirana Benčić from Croatia, Liana Mitelio Tarta from Romania, Yves Orsmans from Belgium, Patricia Burra from Italy, and finally Simona Stankiewicz from Lithuania. So this group has already started working on this important topic, and during 2019 and 2020, last year and half of this year, the following topics have been covered by the core group by literature review, and with these topics in manuscript: current management of DILI, state of the art, treatment with corticosteroids in DILI, NAC in non-acetaminophen DILI and in acetaminophen-induced DILI, role of ursodeoxycholic acid in treatment and prevention of DILI, novel therapies for this treatment and novel biomarkers. And there has also been undertaken, mainly by the Malaga group, systematic review with meta-analysis of prevention and management of DILI in randomized controlled trials. This is the current knowledge. The treatment with corticosteroids has been undertaken in several studies. Review of the literature revealed 4 studies of steroids in acute liver failure that have included some DILI patients from the 70s and from the 80s and 90s, and a retrospective analysis of patients treated with corticosteroids in the United States of a part of the acute liver failure study group. And these were mostly negative studies. Uncontrolled studies in DILI with other patients than patients with acute liver failure have been published both as a unspecific or unselected DILI and also patients with so-called drug-induced autoimmune hepatitis. And this experience has been published in Clinical Gastro and Hepatology. And there are also accumulating reports on retrospective studies on treatment of liver injury induced by immune checkpoint inhibitors or checkpoint inhibitors with steroids. And this is just one of the recent reviews on the management of this important, recently recognized type of DILI. So there are many unanswered questions in this treatment of patients with DILI due to immunotherapy. So both for drug-induced autoimmune hepatitis with drugs like nitrofurantoin, minocycline, and infliximab, and also DILI due to checkpoint inhibitors, as I mentioned earlier. So the question for the treatment is when. There are no studies to guide us how long we should wait after the discontinuation of the drug before we should start with steroid treatment. It's not clear if histology will guide us or if it's really necessary. So if we decide to treat with corticosteroids, what dose should we need? and for how long. And according to the guidelines of oncology associations, high doses of corticosteroids should be used both in moderate and severe DILI without any controlled trial to support that recommendation. Here we can see a patient with severe acute hepatitis, a 40-year-old woman with rheumatoid arthritis who was treated with infliximab and was found to have severely elevated aminotransferases on the left, and on the right the biopsy with intensive inflammation and apoptosis in the liver. And if we can see the timing, we can see that approximately in the middle of April, she developed about 500 in ALT. At that time, the drug was discontinued, and it was not until 2 months later that there was no tendency for the liver tests to improve. Rather during that 2 months time, the ALT increased. And here 2 months later, after the start of the reaction, steroids were given as treatment with prompt resolution in improvement of liver tests. So we also have studied NAC systematically, the impact with acetaminophen or paracetamol drug-induced liver injury. And this was led by Professor Anna Licata from Italy, where they found overall 28 studies with a large number of patients, and with overdose of paracetamol. There was a large variability of NAC regimens, both in terms of intravenous and oral therapy, and oral IV NAC were found to have similar efficacy. Furthermore, for the use of NAC in non-paracetamol drug-induced liver injury, there has been undertaken another systematic review led by Judith Sanabria from Malaga, and after thorough review of the literature with inclusion-exclusion criteria, they were able to come up with 5 studies that could be selected for analysis. Only one randomized control trial, which was performed by Dr. Lee, as I mentioned earlier. The others were observational studies. Furthermore, we have, in this context, done a systematic review of role of ursodeoxycholic acid in treatment and prevention of DILI. There were mainly case reports, but also 7 studies including prospective and retrospective populations, and only 2 randomized controlled trials, both in children with leukemia, where this has been done, both in prevention of methotrexate-induced liver injury and chemotherapy-induced liver injury. But this is all we have. We have also tried to collect data on novel therapies for the treatment of DILI, and many different compounds have been used in animal models, but also some in humans. Finally, I would like to point to a very thorough systematic review with meta-analysis, prevention and management of DILI, and non-acetaminophen acute liver failure. And I'm not sure you see the whole picture very well here on the screen, but after exclusion and inclusion, they were able to come up with 22 randomized controlled trials that fulfilled the predetermined criteria. 12 were based on prevention, mostly in patients with tuberculosis, in order to try to prevent DILI, and 10 in management, Most of the trials were conducted in Asian countries, and these 3 substances with marked in green are available in Europe: silimarin, NAC, and carnitine. Furthermore, in Asian countries, bicyclol, magnesium isoglycinide, tiopropion, and traditional Chinese medicines have been used. With this analysis, a major lack of harmonization in inclusion and exclusion criteria was observed, and also for the causality assessment and definition of DILI, only 3 of these randomized controlled trials reported the use of a specific causality assessment scale, mostly RUCAM, and the randomization method was described in some of the studies, but not all. And of the randomized controlled trials, 8 were double-blinded and 4 open-labeled. For the results, the participants in prevention treated with silimarin had better outcome in open and unclear blinded trials than those in double-blinded trials. Most of the drugs used for treatment of DILI showed a favorable safety profile, although 7 studies did not provide information on adverse effects. So it can be concluded that this systematic review highlights the difficulties and disparities of the limited clinical research in DILI. The creation of a working group is critical to set standards for adaptive clinical trials design and establish precise endpoints to measure the efficacy of novel intervention in DILI in the context of international research networks such as planned in the framework of the COST action as mentioned earlier. So my final slide and conclusions are the following. We have done a review of the literature on what has been studied, tried, and reported as potential therapy for DILI. This is important for the work ahead. We have reviewed potential novel therapies that can be possible targets for treatment or should be the potential therapies for treatment. And after scrutinizing the existing literature, the aims are to come up with definitions of thresholds criteria, definition of endpoints and outcomes, suggesting stopping rules, safety signals, and monitoring plans, and last and not least, design a therapeutic trial in DILI, which is the goal with adequate methodology. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bueno, creo que Einar nos va a conectar finalmente, ¿no? Para las preguntas. No sé si Maribel, Raúl, queréis comentar algo sobre el tema.
Yo realmente creo que es uno de los objetivos que se ha puesto la CIO2 y que muy bien ha explicado Einar en su presentación es el tratar de hacer y plantear un buen diseño de ensayo clínico con unos criterios de medida de eficacia robustos y sobre todo identificar qué diseño mejor desde una perspectiva adaptativa para también valorar la eficacia de los nuevos biomarcadores que se están identificando en la toxicidad hepática por fármacos y para esto necesitamos crear una red de centros que puedan cooperar con este protocolo único muy bien montado a nivel internacional para reclutar un número adecuado de pacientes en un espacio de tiempo pues ciertamente limitado, ¿no? Para no extendernos como 7 años que han dicho cuando hicieron lo de las biopsias perdidas de salud. Y en este sentido yo sí quiero agradecer pues Madrid, que también ha hecho una aproximación, como ya ha comentado Einar, y finalmente Jao, que ha llevado a cabo ella, pues, la revisión sistemática, naturalmente la ha dirigido conjuntamente con Einar y con Luis, una revisión sistemática sobre todo lo que ha publicado actualmente. En ensayos clínicos de DILI, como veis, más del 50% de esos estudios se han hecho en China con debilidades metodológicas. De esos 22 ensayos, solamente uno tenía, se podría decir que cumplía todos los requisitos metodológicos y evitaba todos los sesgos posibles en la reutilización de estos estudios, pero con unos tamaños muestrales también ciertamente muy limitados. Por lo tanto, yo creo que el reto está ahí. ¿Podemos hacerlo? Yo creo que sí, que merece la pena, ¿no? Definir muy bien la población de niños, cuál va a ser, y a mí me parece que, como le decía a Miriam ayer, que ese es el reto que nos tenemos que poner y pedir al horizonte 2020 un proyecto importante. Porque como también se ha demostrado ahora muy recientemente en un artículo publicado en Japón, la investigación individual va a ir del paciente al laboratorio. Es decir, de las muestras funcionales de los pacientes se van a poder hacer toda la investigación in vitro, en vivo, para poder identificar cuáles son los mecanismos. Por lo tanto, esa necesidad sí que la tenemos y creo que el conocimiento y el talento están en esta red, eso es seguro, y todos los países que participan, que son actualmente 27, y creo que aparte de 5 países internacionales, que puede ser una oportunidad, ¿no? Hacer este desafío. Yo creo que contamos también con todos y con centros también de trasplantes, pues puede ser muy bonito el challenge.
Y ahora tenemos la siguiente.
Sí, ahora la siguiente charla también va a ser virtual, va a ser del doctor Javier